Saturday night in A&E. As another stabbing victim hurtled past on a trolley, I began to feel rather afraid, seeking help for a mere swollen hand. It was only a tiny cat bite after all. "I expect you think I'm making a fuss about nothing," I said to the doctor. But my apologetic manner soon turned to alarm as my swollen hand was taken very seriously indeed, with blood tests, examination by a junior doctor, then a senior colleague, who told me, "I'm sorry, but you won't be going home tonight. 4 in 5 animal bites are minor and seldom require medical attention, but a bite to the hand is the most risky place to be bitten because the joints and tendons are close to the surface, and if bacteria from a bite penetrate the joint or sheath around the tendon, trouble can spread rapidly." An astonishing 80% of cat bites to the hand become infected, and according to the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence (NICE), a cat bite injury, particularly to the hand, can be devastating in terms of infection and permanent disability if not treated appropriately. I had one patient whose index finger no longer bends because the cartilage in the knuckle was destroyed within 24 hours, says Maxim D. Horwitz, a consultant hand and wrist surgeon who treats dog-cat bites at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London. Another patient had to have a finger amputated. Worst-case scenarios when the infection is confined to the hand are tendon rupture and chronic infection that can destroy the joint and bone. Where the infection spreads to the whole body, you can get sepsis, he says, but this is rare. The list of other possible complications makes for grim reading. Animal or human bites can cause osteomyelitis, endocarditis and meningitis. However, these conditions are also extremely rare, and it's usually patients with impaired immune systems who are at greater risk of serious complications. While dogs are responsible for 60 to 90% of bites, cat bites are twice as likely to become infected. This isn't because cats are dirty or all mouths carry bacteria, but is due to the nature of the bite. Dogs tend to cause a more open wound with tearing and tissue damage, while cats with their sharp, narrow teeth create puncture wounds, injecting bacteria deep into the tissue. It's usually just 1 or 2 little puncture wounds, says Mr. Horwitz. This is the problem with a cat bite. Someone has a tiny hole and they don't think much of it like many of us. I was blissfully ignorant of how dangerous a cat bite can be. The trouble had started the previous morning when a strange black and white cat waltzed into my house uninvited through the open back door. I'm guessing it was on the hunt for food, though it was well fed and didn't look like a stray. My 4 whippets took exception to the intruder, and when I instinctively scooped up the moggy to protect it from the barking dogs, it turned on me in a whirlwind of teeth and claws, like a creature possessed. I had no idea cats could be so scary. I staggered out of my front door with the cat hanging from my left arm where its claws were embedded in a painful embrace. With my dogs howling in my face bloody, it was quite a sight for the neighbors. Eventually the cat released me and leapt a 6-foot fence into the garden next door. I was left with scratches to my face, both hands and my left arm and leg. Puss had also sunk its fangs into my thigh and had left a small, deep bite to my right hand, just over the knuckles of my last 2 fingers, which had splattered blood over the porch and front door. I felt shocked and shaky. Getting savaged by a cat burglar was the last thing I expected on a quiet Friday morning, so I did the sensible thing: washed the bites and scratches in soap and water and set off for the minor injuries unit for a tetanus jab. As it had been 25 years since my last booster, the nurse dressed my wounds and sent me home with 7 days of Comoxiclav antibiotic pills. My hand was a bit sore, but that, I thought, was that. End of story. Except it wasn't. The next morning my hand felt better, but by the evening I noticed a change for the worse. The bite had become painful again with a weird tingly feeling, and the wound had begun to ooze through the dressing. Despite strict instructions to leave the dressing in place for 48 hours, I removed it to find my hand was red and puffy. How inconvenient, just as I was about to go out with a friend. It's not swollen, is it?" I asked him. "Don't be ridiculous. It's like a giant ham. Your knuckles have completely disappeared," he said. So we set off for Saturday night in a busy London A&E department at St. Mary's, Paddington. After a blood test, I was diagnosed with cellulitis, a bacterial infection of the deeper layers of skin and underlying tissue. The initial symptom is an area of the skin that has become red, hot, swollen and tender. It can be caused when bacteria enter the skin through a cut, bite or even crack caused by eczema and athlete's foot. In the case of cat bites, 75% of infections are caused by Pasteurella multisida, an organism found found in the mouths of cats and dogs. Any resulting cellulitis can develop at lightning speed with a post-bite incubation period of 4 to 24 hours. Most people recover from cellulitis after antibiotics, but severe infections can spread deep into the body and be life-threatening, according to NHS Choices. I admit I felt slightly panicky once I understood the potential danger I was in, largely because somebody close to me had died of sepsis. After my diagnosis in A&E, I was given a hasty dose of intravenous antibiotics, then sent on a midnight trip to Chelsea and Westminster Hospital where the plastic surgery department was expecting me. It seems specialists and plastic surgeons are responsible for treating animal bites, among other things. At 4.30 I had my wound washed out under local anesthetic. I gather there was a satisfying amount of blood in post. Many bites require surgery under general anesthetic, so I was thankful to be spared that. Finally I was taken up to a ward where I was admitted to receive 24 hours of intravenous antibiotics. I was then sent home with antibiotic tablets. I had an outpatient checkup 4 days later and that was that. After excellent treatment, I felt I'd got off lightly. However, when I related my story about being hospitalized by a moggy, most people, even cat owners, were incredulous. "Is that all?" they said when I showed them the tiny bite responsible. And that's precisely the problem. The wounds don't bleed much and look too insignificant to worry about at first. However, a cat bite, particularly to the hand, should never be ignored. If you think about it, hundreds of people will be bitten by a dog or a cat a day and most won't need to come into hospital, says Mr. Horwitz. But a bite on your hand is far more serious than a bite elsewhere on your body. I'm quite nihilistic about it. If a junior doctor phones me about a cat bite to the hand, I say, bring them in and we'll wash it out and give them a shot of antibiotics. And even if you're on prophylactic antibiotics, as I was, infection can still occur in 14% of cases, according to research by the Mayo Clinic in the US, and will require stronger intravenous antibiotic treatment. Despite my experience, I am still fond of cats, and I don't blame my attacker for mistaking me for the enemy. However, I would never pick up a strange feline in those circumstances again. According to Gudrun Ravitz, president of the British Veterinary Association, understanding cat behavior is the key to avoiding a bite. It's best to avoid touching strays as they may be anxious, which is when a bite can happen. And if a cat is distressed, don't push it away with your hand. Try turning your back. She advises pet owners to use a toy rather than their hands when playing with their pet to minimize accidental bites during play fighting. However, we don't want people to be afraid of cats, as most cats won't bite.